Friends, as Secretary of the Unitarian Universalist Association, it is my distinct privilege to convene the board committee charged to propose a recipient for the annual award for distinguished service to the cause of Unitarian Universalism. The award is presented each year to honor one who has made extraordinary contributions in helping to strengthen Unitarian Universalist institutions while deepening the impact of our ministry. This year, the Unitarian Universalist Board of Trustees is honored to celebrate the exemplary service of the Reverend Dr. Laurel Hallman. Here to read the citation and introduce Dr. Hallman is her successor as senior minister at the First Unitarian Church of Dallas, Texas, the Reverend Dr. Daniel Cantor.
We start with the words of Laurel Hallman from her 2003 Berry Street essay. She said, "We need a language of reverence. We need a language of forgiveness. We need a language of reconciliation, a language of hope, a language that gives voice to despair." To name a few, that language for centuries and countless cultures have been metaphorical. It has pointed beyond itself to something much deeper than it could name. It is our turn to keep such language alive, hold it in our hearts, and speak to the depths of those who so desperately need our good word. The Reverend Dr. Laurel Elizabeth Hallman, preacher, pastor, leader, grandmother, visionary, teacher, guide, and friend for 50 years. You have ministered to UU congregations, colleagues, and communities in so many cherished ways. Builder of congregations, UU institutions and leaders, spirituality, and friendships. You have brought a vision of the larger truth and a keen wisdom to everything you have done. Born in San Francisco and raised as a fundamentalist Baptist, so serious about your faith you carried your Bible in your books to high school. You learned to cultivate a spirit of soulful contemplation in that faith and purposeful intent to grow a faith. In the 1960s, you prepared to be an elementary school teacher, majoring in music and social sciences. When you moved to St. Paul, Minnesota, you became a Quaker, and then a friend introduced you to Unity Unitarian Church. In the 1970s, you were part of their curriculum design team, building the Images for Our Lives curriculum, using values clarification, matched with stories from many faith traditions. You came to the ministry through church administration and this religious education work and entered theological training at Meadville Lombard in 1977, a divorced single parent and deeply experienced in Unitarian Universalism. Before receiving your MDiv from the University of Chicago Divinity School and your DMin from Meadville, you were a chaplain in San Francisco and the John B. Wolfe Preaching Scholar in Tulsa. Ordained at Unity Unitarian, you were first called to the Unitarian Church in Bloomington, Indiana in 1981, and then in 1987 became the first female senior minister of a large church at First Unitarian in Dallas. That's right, the family starts that. You led both churches to new levels of professionalism, generosity, and spiritual depth. Throughout your career, you have pioneered your place, often in all-male settings where clergy gathered. With dynamic preaching and worship, a high quality of religious education programming, and by helping both members and guests connect to the church in meaningful ways, First Unitarian Church of Dallas doubled to more than 1,000 members, and in 2005 was named one of the first UUA breakthrough congregations. In your justice work in Dallas, you connected with Ernesto Cortez of the Industrial Area Foundations and helped build trust across faith barriers. You have mentored a generation of ministerial interns, trained countless board members, and addressed financial stewardship as a spiritual practice. In the 1990s, you brought Carver policy governance into being at First Church in Dallas, a visionary example of too many large UU churches. Your work to develop and make available a unique spiritual practice for UUs through your Living by Heart program with your mentor, Harry Schofield, has a lasting impact on us all. Your call for us to embrace diverse and spiritually driven language in worship and faith development sustains us and challenges us to live into being the faith we are called to be. Through your collaboration on the Whose Are We book and curriculum, we are further deepened to respond to theological questions of import. You remain grounded, cultivating your own deepening through continued education with the Shalem Institute for Spiritual Leadership. And your leadership contribution to the Meadville-Lombard Theological School extends from being a student and active in the school's ministerial formation program and as a trustee and collaborator and as capital campaign chair. You have been a strong advocate of high standards, willing to take on the role of supervisor, both for students who showed great promise for the ministry and for those who had significant challenges. In 1997, you received an honorary doctorate of divinity degree from Meadville-Lombard. In 2013, you became chair of Meadville-Lombard's Pointing the Way campaign committee to strengthen the foundation of the school and initiate new educational programs. Small in stature, strong in spirit, you meet each challenge with courage and conviction. You have always understood yours was a higher purpose, and so your ministry included leadership in clergy retreats, the publishing of your book, Reaching Deeper, and coaching ministerial colleagues who needed your support and your guidance. Elegant and thoughtful, you model the highest standards of religious leadership in every role you undertake. From lay leader, church administrator, professional religious educator, curriculum developer, parish minister, senior minister, an executive of a large church, spiritual teacher, candidate for the UUA ministry, author, mentor, and trustee. Laurel, we must include poetry also because it has been your sustenance and your guide. Ask Me by William Stafford is a favorite of yours and goes like this. Sometime when the river is ice, ask me mistakes I have made. Ask me whether what I have done is my life. Others have come in their slow way into my thought, and some have tried to help or to hurt. Ask me what difference their strongest love and hate has made. I will listen to what you say. You and I can turn and look at the silent river and wait. We know the current is there, hidden, and there are comings and goings from miles away that hold the stillness exactly before us. What the river says, that is what I say. Reverend Dr. Laurel Hallman, your leadership, fellowship, vision, words, and wisdom are powerful expressions of the best our ministries can offer the world. We are honored to recognize you with the 2016 Award for Distinguished Service to the Cause of Unitarian Universalism.
Thank you. Thank you, Rob Eller Isaacs and the committee. Thank you, Jim Key and Daniel Cantor. I am a bit overwhelmed. Like most of us involved in congregations and in our association, we do what seems to be needed and hope it's worthwhile. Jim Key's call to tell me I am this year's recipient of the Distinguished Service Award caused me for the first time to reflect on what I have done as a body of work, to think of the threads that have been constant in my ministry through the years: the religious literacy of children, the spiritual depths of our members, the strength of our institutions, generosity as a spiritual practice, inviting people in who need us, and community organizing to join forces with other groups to create change and promote justice. A long time ago, I adapted some questions from St. Ignatius for use in my spirituality classes and retreats, as well as for my own practice. I found that ministry had so many demands coming from so many directions that it was easy to lose sight of who I was or what I thought I was doing. When I began to slip into going all directions at once, I would stop and begin the simple practice: who am I? Who else am I? I would insert the phrase, "God be merciful," between my answers to who am I. UUs in my retreats would sometimes be confounded by that additional phrase, but I would encourage them to just go with it. It almost always did its work, which had little to do with the thinly imagined mercy of a thinly imagined God, and a lot to do with deep, metaphorical religious imagination spanning centuries and real, present spiritual depth. I have to admit that after Jim Key called with the news I was to receive this award, I was stunned and then driven back into my who am I practice. Ironically, I have been working with my spiritual director to enlarge my capacity to receive. I was one of those children trained not to be prideful, which became a practice of discounting people when they told me I had been helpful. I've been working on being more receptive to heartfelt sentiments of appreciation. And then God's little trick, that would be a deep metaphorical trick. God's little trick on me was this award. My spiritual director laughed. So here I am receiving the Distinguished Service Award from the faith tradition that saved my life so long ago, when the religion of my childhood, my early worldview, failed me. A Distinguished Service Award for my ministry to congregations which opened their collective hearts and lives to me at a time when it seemed easier for congregations to choose men. I am receiving this award for all the gifts I have already received through the years. It is truly amazing. Early in my time at Unity Church Unitarian in St. Paul, Minnesota, working as an administrator and an RE director, I decided I wanted to preach. My great-grandfather had been a circuit rider preacher. Maybe it's in the genes. I began to preach in churches in the area which needed supply. One Sunday, waiting to preach at the First Universalist Church in Minneapolis, John Hallman said, "When are you going to theological school?" I answered that I had no plans for ministry. I had a young son to raise, and I was happy in my work as it was. He said, "Well, when you do go, we have some scholarship money to help. Let me know." Does this award take into account people like John Cummins, who planted the seeds? When I first started preaching, I discovered that because I am short, I couldn't see over the top of the pulpit in any UU churches. The custodian in St. Paul, Phil Platt, built a riser that I could take with me when I went off to preach. I used it in Bloomington, Indiana, in my first called ministry. I took it with me to Dallas, where, because it was Dallas, they carpeted it, put molding around the corners. And they added a small handle to make it easier to carry. In the meantime, back in Bloomington, a wonderful doctor in the community, Walt Owens, retired, and he took up woodworking. His first project was to build a new pulpit for the church. He built it with a fold-out step for anyone who might need it. The year I preached the service of living tradition in Indianapolis, the good people in Bloomington put the pulpit in a truck, drove it up to the convention center so I could preach from it. I was literally lifted up. I was literally lifted up by their love. I tell you this because if grace is ours according to our capacity to receive, I first have to answer the who am I question by acknowledging that I am here because grace has come to me in the form of congregations and on denominational task forces and committees who met me where I was, as I was, and blessed me with acceptance and love and support. Often that was literal support, not only step-ups into pulpits, but money and time for projects we undertook together. I cherish their memory. The night I lost the UUA presidential election, I stepped up onto a table in a patio to talk with my closest supporters. I told them our message had been important and we had made a difference even though we had lost the election. When I paused for breath, Larry Ladd, who was standing next to the table, said, "I won." I admit I was a bit startled, but in a way I won too. Larry and I were married that September. I've done good work with Bert and Carly for the UUMA, had time to be with my Austrian grandchildren, to do projects I wanted to do for a long time and to enjoy life. I decided to formalize my retirement and walk in the service of the living tradition last June. In the fall, I announced my last sermon, preaching at First Unitarian Church in Dallas for the last time. And then in January, as a surprise even to myself, I accepted the invitation of the Falmouth UU Fellowship on Cape Cod to be their interim minister. So evidently it's not over till it's over. But here's the thing. 3 weeks ago, I was visiting with a couple in the Falmouth congregation, Pillars. We discovered in the course of our conversation that we all had roots in Minnesota. Avis Grossline said, "My sister still lives there in the northwest part of the state, just over the border from Fargo, North Dakota." And then she added, she's a member of the Underwood Unitarian Universalist congregation. I said, I preached at the Underwood Church in the 70s. They had no minister. They wanted someone to preach on Easter. So I would go with my young son in tow and preach for them. The next Sunday, Avis said, "I wrote my sister. She remembers you." She said, "They still have the riser they built for you." My sister said, "Tell her to come back anytime I just might do that. I'll show them this award for distinguished service to the cause of Unitarian Universalism. I'll tell them the part they had in making it possible, and I'll tell them about you here, bearing witness to our beloved faith. Thank you. This is an extraordinary day.